Welcome to Locales Unknown. This podcast gives you the tools you need to choose your next travel destination and the tips you want to be able to explore like a local. Here are your hosts, Chris and Winfield.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Locales Unknown. We have a good one for you today, and it's unlike most of the ones that we've been able to put out for you guys so far. We're joined today with Sanjay Sharma, 159 countries under his belt. He worked for Point.me, an upstart travel blog giving you the best tips on how to utilize your credit card points in order to travel the world like he has. So we're super excited. This one's going to be about travel hacking. We want to know, how is it you can actually get to 159 countries? Because that is not an easy task. Before I just hit the record button, we were talking about how impressive that is, because Winfield over here is, what are you at, 78 countries now, Winfield?
Mm-hmm. That's
and
right.
When you say that to people, everyone's like, whoa, that's crazy. So when you got someone over here that's double that, you have to make sure you pick this guy's brain as much as possible. So thanks for coming on, Sanjay.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Us too. So I was trying to think, where do we really get started? Because we can't go through every single country, right? So maybe we go back to your origin story. How did you get started in the travel hacking space and the inspiration behind this lifestyle you have?
Yeah, totally. I think it was like early in my career, I spent a lot of time in a cubicle, like many people, and wondering if this was it. And so I remember, I think for me, I was originally inspired by actually another blogger, Chris Gilliblow. He runs a blog at a site, and the whole mantra there is the art of non-conformity. So how do you sort of live a life and not conform to the the norms that are kind of imposed on us. And at the time, I think he was pursuing a goal to visit every country in the world. And I thought, okay, well, that's never going to happen, but maybe I could visit 50 countries. And so I started with that goal, and I was surprised. Surprised that it became achievable once I had the goal. So I think that's what's kept me going. And then, like you said, now I'm at 159, so I am sort of thinking, maybe I'll just go for all of them.
You're on a roll, clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. Why stop now?
And Chris was a big inspiration for me as well, Mr. 193 countries.
Yeah.
I read his book. I've read his blog. I keep up with his Instagram. So shout out to Chris. If you're ever free for the podcast, come on. Come on.
I've emailed him directly, and he responds. So I mean, he is out there.
I find that really cool. Winfield and I were talking about how we look at your Instagram and what you've been able to do. And, people in the travel space are just so accessible. And I love that. A lot of the times people are willing to share their knowledge, share their expertise. And I mean, you're making a living doing that, right? So just being able to share your experience, which is awesome. And I got to imagine things have changed from when you started to nowadays. Of course, pandemic aside, the rules and regulations. I know for myself, I'm no longer eligible for the bonus points with American Express. They're like, you tried too many times, buddy. Sorry.
Well, there's always a way. That's one of the key principles of travel.
That's why we're talking to you right now.
Yeah.
I loved what you just said earlier about kind of never say never. When you said, 50, that sounds like a lot. Let's start with that. No way I'm going to get to all of them. I remember when I was stepping into the space too, I kind of felt that same way in terms of, I'm at 30 now. They're, roughly 193 officially, according to who you ask. And then I thought to myself, wow, like I just had that I woke up one morning, I'm like, I'm just going to go for all of them. Like this can be done. And I think a lot of people, and it's not necessarily going to every country is not for everybody, but it's that same mantra with just stepping out of your comfort zone and thinking, okay, I hear about somebody doing this. What's going to make me take that first step? And I know that you have a lot of insight about that. Maybe you could shed some light on that in terms of the inspiration, but translating that into action.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed is once I started setting goals around this, I just slowly started sort of shifting my life to kind of deliver on this goal. So whether it was, choosing to go live abroad at certain times just so that I can travel around Asia. I lived in India for a couple of years, and that was part of the reason I went out there. Even now, when I pick jobs, I'm very, very focused on how flexible are they going to be, or how is this job going to enable me to achieve this goal. So I think part of it is just looking for how do you orient your life around what matters most to you. I'd say the other thing with the goals is I always try to not lose sight of the fact that the goal of 50 countries or 100 countries or 193 countries is still ultimately about, rich travel experiences. So I'm not trying to, drop into a country and spend 3 hours there and leave. Like I truly want to experience it. And sometimes that means going back to a place I've already been to, or spending a lot of time in one country and foregoing the opportunity to pick up another one. But I think, ultimately that's really what I want. So, the goal is helpful, but I think what's exciting is knowing why you're in it for yourself, and, why are you traveling that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To achieve the goal is one thing, but I mean, you just touched upon so much. There's a reason why they call the travel space the lifestyle space as well, right? So I think all three of us have positioned our life around travel and made decisions, whether it be job, whether it be where you're living, or the type of lifestyle that you do live in order to achieve, not just, like you said, pop in and out of every single country, but to truly immerse yourself in the experience of travel in general. So you said you lived in India for a couple of years. I have to ask you how that is.
Yeah. Well, it was meant to be a 10-month sort of opportunity out there. And it was tough. I won't lie. It was tough to adapt. My background is actually Indian, but I have no real connection to the country, which actually presented its own challenges, because everyone there would see me and think, you're Indian, and I was like, well, not really. But I did adapt, and actually that's why I decided to stay for that extra year, because I was like, well, now that I figured out how to live here and sort of become a part of a community here, why would I leave now? And I will say it was incredible, the amount of the travel opportunities within India and around Asia, made it completely worthwhile. So
sure.
Yeah.
I went to India for a week 6 years ago now.
Okay.
And you were just talking about not just popping into an airport and taking your time and smelling the roses.
Yeah.
It was a whirlwind tour.
Yeah.
I did Mumbai, Delhi, Agra, Darjeeling, and Calcutta in a week.
Nice.
But again, also to your point, India left me wanting so much more.
Yeah.
Not only because of just the diversity of languages, the cultures. There are just so many intricate fabrics that were woven into every single state that I knew as soon as I touched down and as soon as I left that I would be back multiple times.
Yeah.
And that's, as you were saying as well, forgoing one or two new countries to spend some time in ones that are really life-changing.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice to people that are, the count is one thing. And of course, we all have time and resource constraints, and flexibility is important, but you really have to think about why you're doing it and who you're doing it for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm glad that you got that world in, because sometimes I think the best way to see a country like India or Brazil or some of these sort of gigantic countries with so much to offer is do the whirlwind, kind of see what appeals to you, and then go back and zoom in on particular parts of it. I think with India, one thing that a lot of people outside the country maybe don't appreciate is that there's actually a lot of natural beauty there. Most people go for the architecture and the culture, and those are amazing too. But you've got the Himalayas, and incredible beaches, and all these types of landscapes that all in one country. So for me, that's reason enough to go back. And that's just one country with that kind of variation. But those are the ones that I find the most exciting, and I have no problem going back to over and over again.
No, precisely. And I think that also with Sri Lanka right across the way, it was interesting. I went there not too long ago. Well, actually, 9 years ago now. Hard to believe as well. But it was interesting that was kind of that there was some connection to the subcontinent in terms of linguistically, culturally, etc. But at the same time, it was a big distinction as well. And I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously, a lot of issues there. We had one of our previous guests, Chirendra, on, who gave us a really great overview. Shout out to you, Chirendra. Thanks again. But it's and the Maldives as well. All of these, the Nepal, Bhutan, all of these countries that touch or border India physically or culturally in terms of metaphorically. It was quite interesting to me, at least.
Yeah, I'll have to catch that the Sri Lanka podcast, because I've been, but it's one I need to go back to. So maybe I'll get up to speed. And the Maldives also haven't been there yet, so I'm saving that for a special occasion.
Yeah, awesome. So I have to ask, obviously you've done so many countries, and we talked about this earlier, that you're mainly using credit card points. Is that right?
Yeah, at least for like the long haul international flights, sure. I'm almost exclusively over the last 10 years or so have used points for all of that. So,
and that probably took some time to work up to as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it's an ongoing game, I guess. I'm definitely one of those people who's always keeping an eye out for what are the best credit card offers at the moment, and I'm signing up for cards. I think right now I have 24 cards that are open, at that moment. And so I'm always managing my portfolio of cards. And I only use 3 or 4 of them day to day, but that's what's open. And then, I always keep an eye out for like airline promotions during sort of the COVID era. That there's been a lot of them, and they've been pretty rich. And then, in my previous role, I was lucky enough to be able to travel for work a little bit, so that helped me earn some points and use the corporate card as well. So there's different strategies for everyone, but I've figured out what works for me. So I'm always kind of replenishing my points as I deplete them.
Yeah. So how did you get started with that? Was it because of work and you just decided to capitalize on the points, or was this an objective when you wanted to get to those 50 countries?
Yeah, it's funny. I have a story that I think is pretty similar to a lot of people who become kind of points and miles enthusiasts. I used to work in banking and then consulting, and I think for whatever reason, the people that end up in those two fields, are drawn to optimizing credit card points and loyalty programs and so on. Part of that is because of the work travel. I think it's also a personality thing. We're sort of extreme coupon collectors, I guess. But yeah, so I was interested. I kind of like the fact that it is a bit of a game, and I do get a bit of a thrill, when I can book a round the world ticket and I spend $150 out of pocket. I mean, that's hard to beat. But I do think the process of using points is way too difficult, and it shouldn't be that difficult. So actually, the company I work with, Point Me, we're trying to solve for that and make it easier for more people to get the kind of value that I'm getting out of their points. So stay tuned for more on that. But my passion was just, I liked the game of it, and the more I learned about it, the more I got the reward of traveling wherever you want for very little money is hard to beat.
Oh, indeed. And I think as you mentioned there, that there's been so many times where I just scratch my head and I think, why is this flight available, but these 15 other options aren't, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Whether I'm dealing with Star or SkyTeam or, you name it.
Yeah.
One World. It's just, I'm thinking to myself, they're trying to obviously maximize rear ends and seats because that's the business model.
Yep.
So you stop 2, 3, 4. I've seen 5 time stops, a couple for some routes.
Yeah.
But it just seems, as you said, unnecessarily cumbersome, and even to a point now with some airlines where I don't even want the card anymore because I'm just so frustrated with, for instance, I'm in South America currently right now, and I can't book anything within South America. It has to have a U.S. nexus. So I'm paying, yeah, right. So I'm paying out of pocket, hundreds of dollars that I wasn't expecting to spend because none of these airline alliances are honoring the code sharing agreements that they already have. So
that's
I think
frustrating.
that's a common problem out there that a lot of people are really fed up with.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. My general advice to anyone who's interested in starting to accumulate points is to try to focus on the points that are issued by the credit card companies versus the airline ones. And the reason for that is, the points that are issued by American Express or Chase or Citi or Capital One, all of those points can actually be transferred or exchanged to an airline program. And so I think for most people, having those credit card points just gives you a lot more flexibility. You're not as tied to any one airline or any one alliance. So, I totally hear the frustration of what you're saying there because, once you've kind of banked all your points with a specific airline, you're kind of stuck with their rules and their partners, and they can change those at any time. So, I think that's sort of one workaround.
Right.
So
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I've done that as well. I've
Yep.
used Capital One Venture. I've got Chris and I both use Sapphire.
Yep.
And we've been through the gauntlet in terms of the rotating wheel. But I think that is great advice because you can also use through the major companies. You can use it on car rentals, hotels. You can even pay yourself back. So depending on how your budget is coming in around statement time or whatever, the more flexibility, the better.
Yeah, it gives you options. It's kind of a better store of value, but I do think if you're redeeming for air, you're usually going to get the best value if you're using all sort of the tricks that are out there. So yeah,
there are definitely a lot of tricks out there, though.
Yeah,
and that's
there's a lot of content.
A lot of content. And I first got started in credit card points when I initially was going to take off, do a year abroad in 2018. So I applied for everything under the sun that I could based off of blogs at the time, like Nerd Wallet and other things like that. But I always got lost once I started looking further and go deeper down the rabbit hole where this card's better for this particular time, or I should use this for this purchase. And I understand it as much as I understand crypto. This is too much, man. Yeah. Just give me one where I can get the points, and it's it's simple as that.
Yeah.
And I never really went towards the hotel chain ones. Do you utilize those credit cards as well for hotel points?
So personally, I'm kind of like you, where I was more focused on the airlines, and my way of thinking about it is like I can't travel without getting on a plane to get somewhere, whereas hotels I could find an Airbnb or there's other places to stay. That being said, the last couple of years I have got a couple of hotel cards, but I mostly keep those around because a lot of them have the benefit where you get at least one free night a year, and that usually pays for the annual fee and more. So I hold on to the card. I use the free night, which is kind of nice to have in a pinch if you're staying somewhere. And some of the cards actually come with like elite benefits, so you might get free breakfast, for instance, or other benefits. So they're worth holding on to for those perks if you tend to stay at one of the major chains. But personally, if I was only going to have a few cards in my wallet, I'd pick the points that you can use with airlines, because I think that's where you get a lot more value, and I think that enables a lot more travel as well.
Yeah. So how do you keep track of all these 24 cards of yours?
So I used to have like a complicated Excel situation going, but that started not working so well. And then there's actually a few apps out there, but the one that I really like is one called Card Pointers. And it's a great app. You can load up all your cards, and it makes it super simple to know which card to spend where. So when I'm at the drugstore or when I'm at a restaurant, like I know what card is going to get me the most value. And the other feature it has that I really like is, a lot of these cards now come with statement credits for various things. And this was really popular during the pandemic, where you'd get, $10 off your groceries once a month, or, your travel credit could be used for other things. And so the same app, Card Pointers, lets you lets you track those credits and make sure you're getting all that value. So highly recommend that one.
Card pointers, you said?
Yeah, card pointers.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome, because that's exactly what I was saying before, where, there's certain credit cards where it sounds great, the initial bonus, but beyond that, do I keep the card open because there's really benefit to it, or am I just trying to snag those initial points and then leave? So, I think I mentioned before we started recording that I recently went for the Delta Sky Miles credit card, which is American Express, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
And I was denied because I tried too many times to get entry bonuses.
Oh no.
So they said I could get the card, but I'm not eligible for the entry.
Okay.
So is that something you've ever run into before? And how can I, navigate that situation?
Yeah, totally. So usually before I apply for a credit card, I do a quick Google just to understand the card issuer's policies when it comes to approving cards, because there's usually quite a lot of anecdotal evidence online, like on threads and so on. So I think what you ran into there, I believe Delta has a rule that if you've had any of their card products, you're not eligible for promotion for the next, I want to say 48 months. Don't quote me on that, but there's sort of a period like that. In those cases, there's not much you can do about getting that specific card. But what you could do, for instance, if you want to be flying Delta, is get an American Express membership rewards card, the gold card, the platinum card, or the green card, and those points transfer to Delta 1-to-1. And so you can still ultimately fly on Delta, but using a different card product. So I definitely think, like Googling around before you apply is a good habit, because you don't want the ding on your credit score. The other thing, just because you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is, I think totally accurately, is that there's some cards that you sign up for and you get the bonus and then you don't use them anymore. And then there's some cards that you continue spending on. For that first bucket of cards that you don't really need after the sign up bonus, I always recommend downgrading those cards to a free card, but not necessarily canceling them. And the reason for that is canceling them could actually have a negative effect on your credit score. Whereas if you just downgrade them to a no fee card and you put it in a drawer and you never use it, it's actually going to potentially help your credit score, because it keeps the sort of total credit available on the higher end, and eventually becomes one of your older credit cards. The only tip with that is make sure you use the card like at least once a year, just to kind of keep it active so they don't shut it down on you. But I would avoid canceling a card if you don't absolutely have to.
Well, I think that kind of leads into debunking some rumors, because again, I'm a novice at all of this.
Yeah.
I know the surface level and that's about it. But if I'm leaving a card open and I'm not utilizing it, is it actually detrimental to me and my credit and the fact that I have this stale account? Or should I, like you said, just use it once a year? But then you mentioned that the credit card company might shut it down. I didn't know that that's what the result might be.
Yeah. So generally, if you close a credit card, it's going to reduce the amount of credit you have available to you, which means that your credit utilization is going to go up. And that can have a minor but negative effect on your credit score, at least temporarily. So it is generally better practice to leave it open, and not pay a fee on it. Some of the banks, though, if they see a card that hasn't been active for 12 months, might send you a notice saying, hey, we need you to use this card or we're going to shut it down. You want to avoid a bank shutting your card down. So I just try to make sure there's at least one transaction on the card. I think once a year is a good number, but whatever, if it's a little bit more frequent than that wouldn't hurt. My way of doing that is just to set up some kind of recurring bill on that card and then have auto pay set up. So I don't really need to think about it. But I know that, it's not going to be shut down on me.
Yeah, that's smart, because it was always a wonder of mine, because I've heard it various different places, from whether it be YouTube or blogs, make sure you utilize it. I didn't know that the bank would threaten you with shutting it down, obviously having that negative impact.
It depends on the bank. I've seen it more with certain banks and less with others. I do want to give the one big disclaimer, which is that all of this is on the assumption that you're paying your card in full every month. If you're not, then you're much better off paying down your debt than earning points.
Rule number one.
Rule number one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, because recently I actually went through the same issue that Chris had.
Oh, okay.
I had Sky Miles open 2 years ago, and that's how I went. My wife and I went on our honeymoon, basically off of that award bonus.
Amazing.
And then 2 years later, I called them up, same thing. Oh, you've already opened this card. So I think with Amex, it's based on the type of card. If it's a gold or a platinum, if you've had it once before, you're eligible for that bonus at that level. So my workaround was just have my wife open one.
Yeah.
So you didn't hear that, Amex. But also going back to your point about keeping card open, that's really great advice, because earlier this year, right before I left for Brazil, actually, I applied for 2 travel cards just to rack up some points while I was down here, and I was knocked back for both of them. And I think the reason was that I had opened and closed too many too soon and too short of a period.
Yeah.
So that is something that I learned the hard way on.
Yeah.
So I'm just basically waiting now till sometime next year when I can, get back into the mix, so to speak. And those were kind of ones that are off the radar. One was a PNC travel card, which I didn't even know really existed. And Hawaiian Air had a great bonus out there.
Yep.
I don't know if they still have the promotion going, but that was something that, in terms of exploring the South Pacific, they have some great connections there.
Yeah.
I was seeing, I think on your blog, you mentioned about going to Cook Islands instead of Fiji.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. But first of all, definitely, using a significant other as a workaround is a great hack. So I think that's if you have that option, that's definitely one way to do it. I think the blog post you're referring to, I did a post a couple of years ago about kind of alternatives to popular destinations. And I had just come back from a trip to the Cook Islands, which honestly I had not even heard about until a couple months before booking about it. But it's an island kind of affiliated with New Zealand, not too far actually from Fiji. But what was surprising is there was a nonstop flight from LA to the Cook Islands, so it was super easy to get there. You could book with points, I just thought this is the kind of place that many people may not know about. And may not realize they have alternatives to places like Fiji, which are notoriously kind of hard to get to and fairly expensive, or maybe you've already been there. So, definitely. And actually, that brings me, not to change the topic or anything, but I think, we talked earlier about how points and miles can impose some constraints. You have these itineraries where you have 5 stops along the way. But I think you can actually view those as opportunities. Like you could turn some of those stops into new destinations and do things that you can't do with tickets that you're booking with cash. So it kind of runs both ways. I think points have actually, because of the way the flights that were available, have ended up in countries that I might not have otherwise, including the Cook Islands. So
I'm really happy you said that, because that exact situation happened to me. I went to Everest Base Camp in Nepal.
Amazing.
And on the way, there's really no easy way to get there from the East Coast of the US. So I utilized credit card points, and it took me through, at first it was Istanbul. And then on the way back, I stopped in Qatar. Yep. So it just gave me the opportunity. It wasn't long layovers, but I did choose the options with a little bit longer time, just so I could venture around the city. I took a quick day tour of both.
Yeah.
And it was kind of 3 trips in one. So I think it really depends on the person. Are you going there because you have to be there on a set date in order for, maybe an event? Well, then your plans aren't as flexible as maybe a traveler who's just trying to see 193 countries, So there's opportunity in both.
Yeah, that's a great example. Those are great cities as well for, if you've got even 6 hours in between flights, you can go in and actually get a bit of an experience and probably have a good meal too. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it was great, but I wanted to ask you and give you an opportunity to kind of show off here. Maybe you mentioned the Cook Islands. What are a couple of the other great destinations that might be off the beaten track that you've utilized points for?
Let's see. So not too long ago, I went out to Mauritania, which is a country that most people don't have high on their list, but it was just a really interesting country, very warm, welcoming people. You can do all these kind of desert experiences, immerse yourself in the culture. And there's a very famous iron ore train that runs across the country, which if you're really adventurous, you can actually spend the night kind of on top of a pile of iron ore, just looking at the stars as it kind of makes its way through the Sahara Desert. So that's probably one. I definitely use points to get there. Let me think. Let's see. The Solomon Islands, kind of going back to the Pacific. If you're into diving like I am, it's probably the best diving I've done anywhere in the world, and fairly well connected via Asia and Australia if you can get out there, post pandemic.
They just became independent. Sorry to interrupt you. Or they voted for independence. Honiara.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's and that's the thing is these parts of the world are you don't hear enough about them. So you go out there and it's like you're learning you're learning about a part of the world that you just might not have had any exposure to before. Just throw one more country out there that I was really blown away by, Kyrgyzstan, another country that most people don't really have on their radar. But I went there, and it's an incredible country if you're into the outdoors and hiking and being in the mountains. And I always sort of describe it as it's like going to New Zealand for a third of the cost. And it's actually not that hard to get to. For most of the U.S., you can probably do a quick layover in Istanbul and be there in one stop. So it's if that's the kind of adventure that appeals to you, I haven't been to any place more beautiful. So
you're speaking to me right now. This is right up my alley. I love the fact that it's cheaper than New Zealand, just as beautiful, way cheaper, and accessible,
and open at the moment. So
and open. There we go.
There's a lot to unpack there between Mauritania and Nouakchott, which has come across my radar for a long time, and Bishkek. Also very, very different as you mentioned, but just going back to Mauritania quickly, the people really only live near the coast, right? And what does that train go to Niger or to Mali or both eventually?
Yeah, so the train actually, most people who did what I did and actually ride it actually pick it up kind of in the middle of the desert, and it basically goes out to the coast. So it doesn't actually cross the border. As far as I know, but it goes out to the coast, and I think it's the world's longest iron ore train. I get Mauritania is apparently rich in iron ore. I learned this. And riding this train is an adventure. You're literally sleeping on a pile of iron ore, and so by the time you get to your destination, you're black. You have iron ore, and every your nostrils, your eyes. It's probably not the healthiest thing in the world, but you're never going to forget.
Exactly. No, that reminds me of a long time ago when I was in East Timor. I was there shortly after independence.
Nice.
And I just decided one spur of the moment that I was going to go to this town in the middle, about 3 hours from Dili, the capital, and just hopped in the back of this converted truck. And got to this town and met another guy there who I think that was his 189th country. He was at the very end of his. Shout out to David. We definitely have to have you on at some point. But yeah, he was near the end of, and it just had become recognized by the UN as independent as well.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
And I met this guy, and I didn't speak Portuguese at the time, but they speak Portuguese there, so we were talking in English. He was a pharmacist, and he actually took the day off. He just showed me around. Really hospitable, great people.
I love those.
But then,
but
then to get back to the city, there wasn't any bus service, any regular bus. There were no schedules, nothing. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to get back? What am I going to do? And this intrepid traveler basically told me, look, man, you got to flag something down or else you're not getting back.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, what's going on here? So we collectively flagged down this truck that's filled with stones, kind of your iron ore analogy.
Yeah.
It's filled with all kinds of raw materials that are definitely carcinogenic.
Yeah, it's not good for you.
Yeah. And I just hop in the back of this truck. I have no idea what these guys are saying. We don't speak the same language whatsoever. They're basically like, Dilly, and I'm like, yeah, thumbs up. And we just like we stop a few times. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's terrible is going to happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I just get into the middle of the city at night, and I'm just holding on for dear life to these 2 rails, standing up for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But those are the stories that make traveling so rich,
Yeah.
as you alluded to.
Isn't it crazy though, the things that you'll do when you're traveling that like I wouldn't dream of doing that at home, right? Like I wouldn't
exactly
at home, but on the road,
Yeah.
I'm like, I've done it all over the world, and it's always worked out. And I guess I guess it'll always work out until it doesn't, but hopefully we'll get there.
Hopefully that day never comes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so true though. I mean, I tell everybody when I'm on the road, it's like I'm a different person. Everything is open. I mean, there's been experiences even when Winfield and I and his wife Vivi were in the Amazon or just doing treks or hikes in Brazil. We're walking around these ledges where there's a sheer drop off, and we're looking at each other like, not in the US. Like, no way. But here we go. Anyway, we're in the middle of the jungle. No one's around, but why not, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
So moments like that are really what make it special, but not to bring it too far back, but you did mention, an important aspect of the country being open right now. Obviously, we all love to travel. We want to experience new places. How do you combat that with the pandemic as far as where you're going to go next, where you're going to use the points for?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely added a new dimension to travel. So it's much harder to hop from place to place. And, I think what for me, the experience of traveling during the pandemic has really highlighted how important it is to have someone on the ground who can give you some insight as to what's really going on. It's easy enough to look up, the entry requirements for a country. Do you need a test and do you need a vaccination certificate? The answer is usually yes to both of those questions.
Right.
But what's harder to get a feel for is like, what are the on the ground conditions? Like, are things open? What are the restrictions? What is the state of the country? And for that, I definitely try to like reach out to either local guides or more often people who have recently been to that country. So I belong to a couple of Facebook groups and so on where you can usually find that information. So I would definitely recommend that before going anywhere, because you wouldn't want to go someplace even if you can get in and then find out that everything's closed or worse. So
sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's so critical nowadays. I mean, beyond, like you were saying, getting in and out of the country, which now is pretty standard.
Yeah.
Obviously, just recently things are starting to shut down. And just for reference, we're shooting this right before Christmas here in 2021. So things are ramping up with Omicron and all the different variants and restrictions. But for example, I mean, we were just in Brazil, Winfield and I, and when we were in Manaus, it felt different than when we were in Rio.
Totally.
And on my way down to Brazil, I was in Mexico City, which felt entirely different. Whether people wear masks all the time, whether people are closer or separated, or what is it? Because a lot of the times, at least for me, when I was going to Mexico, I think warmth, I think that Latin culture, the Mexican culture, it's very much community touch, aspect. But to see people separated still, you got to understand that maybe you're not seeing the Mexico of pre-pandemic anymore.
Yeah.
Just for example.
Things have changed.
You might want to set that expectation. You're right. Having the Facebook groups, I never even thought about that to reach out to people. It's smart.
Yeah, there's a community probably for every country in the world. So you can, you could find a group of people. The other thing I'd say is obviously when you're planning your trip, budget for things to go wrong, to have to get a test, getting your results back, all of that. So it's just requires more flexibility and patience, but nothing you can't do.
That's right. Don't stop traveling.
That's
the goal, right?
Yeah.
If you need to change where you're traveling to, okay.
And actually, this is another reason to use points. I think one thing people don't necessarily always know is booking flights with points is usually more flexible. Like if you need to cancel or change it, especially these days, like most airlines are making it really easy to do. So, another plug for points.
And they'll usually refund your taxes in full because you have to pay your taxes in cash. I've had that numerous times because something's shut down or something's changed. I've had so many credits that my head's spinning, but it's still still a good thing.
So for future.
Yeah, exactly. So all of that being said, where's next for you, or which corner of the world are you setting your sights on for 2022?
Yeah, so sort of two different answers to that. So next for me, right after Christmas, I'm heading down to the Caribbean. And the Caribbean is both amazing for country collecting because there's so many destinations there, but also terrible because they're not very well connected. But I'm gonna head down to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada and Dominica and potentially Trinidad and Tobago as well, pending me figuring out the COVID rules. But for me, 2022, I want to continue focusing on Africa. I think for most people who are trying to travel to every country in the world, it's usually Africa that's the last the last place, just because it's also hard to travel around and not very well connected. So hoping to make it out there and if the world opens up, maybe the South Pacific as well.
54 countries in Africa, one at a time.
Yeah, and it's sometimes easier to fly in and out of them from the U.S. or from Europe than to get between them. So
I've noticed that, and whether you're flying into Addis Ababa every other day or Nairobi, I mean, the transit points, even when I think West Africa, I usually think Nigeria or Lagos.
Yeah.
But even that, it's pretty limited. South Africa is a great hub to go out of Africa.
Yeah.
But within Africa, as you mentioned, it's pretty limited. So
yeah, and it's gotten worse. I mean, South African Airlines shut down, and then there's the conflict in Ethiopia, which has made Addis a little bit dicier to transit through, which was probably the best hub in Africa. So it's gotten harder, not impossible, but I mean, I don't know, it's worth it. I find Africa to be the most rewarding place to travel, so I never have a problem going back.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of intrepid travelers that I've talked to or just had contact with in passing say that Africa is by far their favorite continent and the most rewarding in terms of diversity of travel experiences.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big place, and maybe I'm saying that because I've been spending a lot of time there, because most of the countries that are open in the world or have been open in the world were in Africa over the past 2 years. But yeah, I definitely think it's true.
Hopefully you can make it to every single one of them in Africa. And that kind of leads us right into the lightning round, our first question. So we do this at the end of every episode. It's 10 questions.
Okay.
And we're going to kind of change it, as I mentioned in the beginning. We'll put it more towards your intrepid travels rather than just a specific country. So ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Question 1. One wish, what would it be?
To be able to speak any language, that would be incredible.
Any language, like on the drop of a hat, or
yeah, like if I could just show up in a country and communicate, I think that would be transformative.
Changes everything.
Yeah.
I know that by spending
Huge.
2 weeks in Brazil, not speaking any Portuguese, and relying on this guy right here to translate everything for me. For sure. That's awesome. So then, which country do you want to visit the most and why?
Next year, I want to go to Tajikistan. I'm hoping it's a little bit like Kyrgyzstan, which I mentioned earlier. Really beautiful, really inexpensive, and like untouched.
Nice. So usually the next question would be, what's one place or thing in your country you still really want to do? But maybe we can switch it up. Is there anything in particular anywhere in the world in a specific country that you want to do?
Yeah, in the north of Ethiopia, there's this area called the Danakil Depression. I think it's the hottest place in the world. I would recommend anyone just Google it and take a look at it. It doesn't look like it's on Earth. And that's pretty high on my list. Unfortunately, that's where the conflict is right now, so it might be a while before I can get out there.
Yeah. Wow. And what's it called again?
The Danakil Depression.
Danakil Depression.
Yeah.
I have to look that up. I haven't even heard of that.
It's often featured in like Planet Earth and those types of documentaries because it's so interesting.
Really cool. So, what's the strangest thing you've ever eaten?
I mean, I've definitely eaten bugs in Latin America and so on, but nothing sticks out. I mean, I've had grasshoppers, like fried grasshoppers, but I don't even think that counts as strange anymore.
Do you like them?
I didn't mind them. I didn't mind them.
Let's see. All right. What's your favorite thing? Usually it's about your country, but we'll say, what's your favorite thing about travel?
I feel like for me, my favorite thing about travel is when you have those like unscripted, unexpected experiences, like the one that you were just sharing with us, where something happens that you could never have imagined, but it's gonna stay with you forever. So like those stories you kind of collect along the way.
Yeah, they're transformative experiences. And that's truly what travel boils down to, at least in my eyes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Grow as a person too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully.
So you kind of answered this. What's the must-see attraction? Usually it's in your country, but anywhere in the world.
Must-see attraction anywhere in the world.
Tough, right?
That's a hard one.
No pressure.
I don't know. That's a tough one. Maybe I will answer for this country. I'm in the U.S. and in New York. I think our national parks in the U.S. are maybe the best in the world, or and should be seen by everyone. So
those were we both answered that as well.
Okay.
When we did our lightning round, so we're all in agreement on that.
Let's see. What's one tip you have for travelers?
Go with the flow. Like it's definitely not gonna go the way you think it's going to. So just go with where it is going.
Not always in a bad way either.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
There's quite a bit of times where it turns out better than expected.
Yeah.
So then what motivates you to travel?
Curiosity, I think. Ever since I was a kid, just what's out there, and can I see it and be a part of it?
All right, we're up to 9 here. So which mode or modes of transportation do you recommend? Usually it's in your country, but maybe we can just say, I don't know, overall. Yeah, we're talking to the points guy here, so we might have an answer already.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, traveling by plane is how I get around, and I've definitely, for me, while the destination is really why I'm traveling, I actually enjoy the process of flying and airports and aviation. So I do like geeking out on that. But when you're in a country and trying to get around, if you can get your own car and do it at your own pace, that's it's hard to beat as well.
So when you're in country, you generally lean towards a rental car?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the country. Like I'm not the best driver because I live in New York. So if it's a country with terrible traffic or terrible roads, I might not go that route. But if it's an option, then yeah, that's what I like to do.
Far more flexibility, freedom.
Yeah. And you kind of
arrive on time.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're up to number 10 here. So if there is one experience you could relive in your life, what would it be?
Oof, that's a hard one. I think it would be this whole journey of traveling to every country in the world. I think I mentioned this before we started recording. I made the mistake, I guess, of starting with relatively easy countries. If I could go back and do it over, I would probably start with some of the tougher ones, and save the quote easier ones for either group travel or when I'm a bit older. So I don't know, it's sort of a cheating answer to your question, but hopefully it works.
I think that's a travel tip for anyone trying to get to the number of countries that you have already and beyond. So
focus on the challenging ones, because the easy ones and by easy I mean they're close by or easily accessible. Yeah, they'll always be there. So
there has been a ton of great travel hacks in this episode, Sanjay. We couldn't thank you enough. Really appreciate the time here. I gotta say, I have a whole bunch of notes that I'm gonna use myself, and I'm supposed to be the host.
Likewise.
Yeah, reach out anytime. I also learned a lot, so it was good meeting you guys.
Awesome, man.
Thanks so much, Sanjay.
And before we let you go, where can people find you?
So on Instagram, real simple, Sanjay1, SANJAY1. And if you Google "Point Me to the Plane," that's a blog that's run. It's a sister blog to the company I work for. I occasionally write there as well, so you'll find some of my posts there. So and feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Well, we'll include the handles in the show notes as well when the episode does come out. So once again, really appreciate the time, Sanjay.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thanks so much, Sanjay. Stay in touch. See you somewhere in the world soon.
I hope so.
Somewhere. Take care.
So without further ado, we're back with another fun fact. There are currently in excess of 25 billion credit cards circulating throughout the world. So assuming a population worldwide of 8 billion, that's almost 3 cards per person. This takes into account children and other individuals that might not be qualified for credit. So it just goes to show that it's truly a mind-boggling number, but the best travel card is waiting for you out there. Enjoy.
Well, there you have it. Another fun fact about a locale unknown. Thank you, Winfield, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode with us. We started this podcast in the hopes of shedding some light on the various destinations out there in the world that might be more off the beaten path. And we're hoping we're accomplishing that goal by bringing on our friends and our various guests to give us some insight about their various locations and what to do in the areas. So if you like what you hear, make sure that you follow us on all the podcast platforms as well as the social media platforms out there, because we're back every single week. I wouldn't want you to miss what we have coming up. We already have a couple great guests in the pipeline that we are very excited for, and I think you guys will be too. So we are on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on all the other platforms. Locales Unknown. Go ahead and hit the search. When you find us, be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button. And if you're an Apple Podcast user out there, please let us know how we're doing. We're building this for you guys. So scroll down to the bottom of Apple Podcasts and go ahead and leave us a review and maybe some comments there. Also on social media, we are very active on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. We have our YouTube channel, so feel free to go ahead and drop us a line. We have our website, localesunknown.com. You can find all of our episodes there. And if you want to reach us directly, we have our email address, contact@localesunknown.com. Maybe you have some suggestions for us. Maybe you want to introduce us to someone that you think might be a great fit for the show. We are all ears. So once again, thank you so much for listening. We'll be right back here next week with another great episode somewhere out there in the world. Stay tuned.